Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name, and this is Ginny O Talks, the part of the channel where I talk about anything I want sometimes. And today I want to talk about union strikes, corporations, and what I call spreadsheet mentality. So in essence, I kind of want to talk about why in the world is this even happening. Um, I will try not to be too political, but apparently, if you talk about unions or labor rights or, supporting the workers, it's might be deemed as political, even though we have an entire national holiday about this and an international holiday about this, uh, which are two separate days. At some point, I just I don't know. I can't just saying I support the workers is, I don't think it should be a political statement, but somehow it is. So my background is actually pretty much 100% manufacturing one way or another. My father owned a small parts manufacturing shop, and I went to school for fashion, which is 100% manufacturing. My dad was like, "Why are you going to school to learn about manufacturing?" And I'm like, well, I don't really care about the manufacturing end, I care about the creative end. And and I've also worked other like manufacturing style jobs. Like I worked for my father and I also worked for a construction company. So like manufacturing is kind of something that I've personally worked in and I've been educated about in an entire industry that relies on overseas manufacturing. And then I went into book publishing and, as an independent and had to start looking at services of how do I want to get my books published? Do I want to go through a vanity publisher? Do I want to use a vanity print-on-demand service like Lulu? Honestly, highly recommend using something like Lulu if you only want to do like less than 20 copies. Or do I want to go all in and use a printer like Ingram Spark, who could get my books into bookstores? Did not have that type of money, so I went with Amazon Print on Demand and their KDP ebook service because unfortunately that's where the market is. And it's like, as much as I don't want to support the Big River Company and Jeff Bezos, if that's where the market is, that's where you have to be. And my only consolation is I know that Kindle Unlimited, KDP, that type of thing is actually a service they run at a loss. So I don't feel this ethical moral quandary of using that service because even though I'm getting teeny bits of drabs of money, I know they're getting less. But that's the thing. So for those of you who are unaware, the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, has gone on strike. And this is another strike in a long series of strikes over the last few years. We had a coal mine on strike for 2 years, I believe in Alabama, that unfortunately ended with a win for the mine itself because it was technological coal. And technological metallurgical coal is in high demand right now for making windmills. We also had the railroad engineers strike around Christmas, around the midterms, which Biden and actually Bernie managed to kind of settle. Biden needs to fix his record on this one, but what happened was they did get the engineers and the 4 different companies to settle. One of the companies has a 7-day of paid leave, and the other companies are going to have to fall in line, or else they'll lose their engineers to the other company. That's just the way it works. So, and now the WGA is going on strike, and this is the latest strike in the media. And strikes are not something that guilds want to do. A strike you might not have heard about, but that also happened between Christmas and February, was a strike for HarperCollins. HarperCollins is the only publishing company in the United States with a guild for their editors and their like illustrators and formatters and stuff. The people who work at HarperCollins publishing house, not the authors, but the people who are actually contracted, not contracted, but employed by HarperCollins, have a union. And they went on strike for 90 days before HarperCollins even kind of consented to talk to them. So we are kind of at this weird, I don't want to call it weird, but it's an inflection point in this country. And it really feels to me, who has studied this, fashion history is kind of one of those a history of the labor movement. One of the largest and most powerful unions in this country is the Ladies' Garment Union. And a lot of what happened in the fashion industry about working conditions and things that happened, like the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, really were a push because it was happening to women, not just children and men in coal mines, to really get this labor movement going. And then we had the stock market crash in the 1920s, and so right after kind of around World War I, and then we had World War II, where the men went off to war and the women stayed home and started doing all these kind of jobs that men had been doing, and it really kind of pushed the labor movement forward. So, like, study fashion, you're studying the labor movement and kind of like the rise of OSHA and stuff like that. So what happens is it becomes a fight between labor on one side and the corporations on the other. They're going head to head, beating at each other type of thing. And a lot of corporations they don't like the idea of a union. Starbucks doesn't like the idea of a union. Well, well, and even small businesses, they don't like the ideas of unions. The Ladies' Garment Union had a policy that if they got into a manufacturing plant here in the United States, if you kept that manufacturing plant in the United States, it was always going to be a union plant. You couldn't move it from, say, New York to California and have the union leave. So a lot of people, a lot of corporations didn't like the Ladies' Garment Union. Like I said, they're very powerful. They were very powerful. So they would take their plants, they would shut them down completely, and then move them overseas. So first they went to China, then they went to India, they've been to Morocco, they've been to Mexico, they've been in places in South America. Corporations are just, moving all this labor around to try to find the cheapest way to do it possible. So when you do a strike, it's not something that you as a worker really want to do, because that means you're not getting paid, you're not getting your job paid. But you do it because you want to, A, be paid more fairly, and B, you want to ensure that your industry is going to be alive and healthy for the children after you, for the next people coming into the industry. You want them to have the same opportunities you did. Sorry, I live on an interstate. This is what happens. It's a little tiny one, it's a little two-lane one, but still. So you are striking for the future good of your industry so that people will have these opportunities, okay? And a lot of times when you start looking at what the corporations are earning versus what the unions are asking is such a small percentage of the overall profits of the company. You don't understand why the company just won't pay. Okay? For instance, the Writer Guild of America is asking, quite literally from my understanding, for 12,000 employees, 2% overall of the total profits. So they want like $250,000 for 11,000 to 12,000 employees spread across them. And the corporations, the whole Hollywood movie industry that is being represented by the other side is making $28 billion a year. So why are they willingly like stonewalling the labor, the people who make their shows profitable, who make their movies, good, for a measly $250 million? That's like a drop in the bucket compared to how much money they're making. Why are they willing to grind the entire industry to a halt because they don't want to pay for 11,000 employees $250 million out of $28 billion? And the engineer strike was the exact same way. You're making 14, 15 billion a year, and they're asking for less than, it was like, I don't know, it was still like 2 or 3%. It really wasn't much. And they wanted paid vacation days, and they just wanted more people working on the train tracks. This is very important. Running those trains can be very, very dangerous. And every single regulation in this country that we have, because this country has been so pro-industry and pro-business for so long, has been written in somebody's blood. Somebody had to lose a hand or their life, or, something had to go terribly wrong for any type of regulation to be put into place. So you hear, that somebody's removing these regulations, and you're like, didn't somebody die already for this? Didn't we have some sort of terrible train accident, that caused these regulations in the first place? But the corporations are going, it is too expensive for us. And it's like, no, it's 2 or 3% of your overall profits, and you keep the economy, $21 billion economy, moving every single day. So you want to grind a $21 billion economy to a halt and, risk losing your profits for what? For a few cents? For pennies on the dollar. So, why does this happen? Why, we could call it corporate greed. I mean, I'm willing to call it corporate greed, because it is. It's very much corporate greed. When you think about it, all these record profits that you're seeing are at the expense of, that's wage theft, of people not getting the money that they need to buy a house, or to pay off their car, or to pay their student loans, or to think about having a safe and secure life that they can have kids. Okay, that's record profits usually come at the cost of laying off workers. How, and you think about, well, how can they have record profits, but they're laying off hundreds of, if not thousands of workers? They have record profits because they're laying off those workers, because they're slashing payroll. Or they have record profits because they are quite literally price gouging. They're putting such a profit margin into their books that, it's not really sustainable for the average human being. Should things really be as costly as they are? No, probably not, because, the companies have gotten so used to these high profit margins, they don't want to let the market ebb and flow naturally like it's supposed to do. And then you have so many industries, your publishing industry, your movie industry, your video games industry, your meat industry, your chickens and your eggs industry, big farming, big your medical industries, your hospitals. These industries have become 5 or 6 or even 4 big corporations. Now, we have laws against this in the United States, but the Department of Justice is so swamped that it's really hard for them to, enforce them. Like, we have laws against having 4 or 5 corporations in the cattle industry. But, this poor DOJ is, like, absolutely swamped with everything there is under the sun, and they just don't seem to have time, or I don't know, it has been brought to their attention, no idea, that there are only 4 corporations in the cattle industry, and this is running small cattle ranchers out of business. So everywhere you turn around, there's like 4 or 5 big corporations controlling everything, okay? And that means there's not a lot of competition. And it also means there's not a lot of opportunity, especially, say, if you're in the publishing industry or any other creative industry like that, Hollywood. So you have, like the Writers Guild, you have a script, you have a novel, and you take it to, you have an agent, and your agent starts shopping it around. Well, instead of 50, 60 presses to shop it around to, or somebody might take a chance on something that's a little out of the box, you have 5 big presses, they have 5 marketing teams, and you might think, oh, there's, 20, 30 imprints under each press. Surely, no. If the marketing team runs numbers and they're like, well, no, we don't think it's going to do very good, that's your entire publishing house. You put it to another imprint in that publishing house, they're just going to say no again. So you have to go to an entirely different publishing house, but there's only 5 big ones. There's not a lot of little publishing houses that are there. Your opportunity shrinks. In the same way for Hollywood, So it's, it's corporate greed. It's lack of competition, which means we're not getting, like, innovation. We're not getting new products that work faster and better because big corporations will buy out little businesses and take those products and put them on the back burner. Refuse to put them to market because they're making lots of money on what they've got right now, and they don't want that competition, but they have the money to be able to buy that competition out, and no innovation. And then we have what I call spreadsheet mentality. Yes, it's taken us almost 20 minutes to get here. And the spreadsheet mentality, in my opinion, is the worst of human nature, combined with, visuals and the numbers going out. So one of the manufacturing customers that I've worked with is an ISO 9000 company. And if you don't know what an ISO 9000 company is, don't worry, I'll explain. ISO 9000 is something from Europe, and they brought it over here to America. And when you are an ISO 9000 company, you are very, very finicky about tolerance levels and how your engineering is supposed to be done, and, everything like that. But on top of that, they kind of measure everything. I don't know if it was just this company or if this is ISO 9000 companies overall, but they measure everything down to worker productivity. In fact, they would bring charts and graphs about how well we'd done as a vendor, how fast it had a turnaround time in, how good the parts were, were we satisfactory type of thing. They would bring this stuff down to us, and they would put all these little charts and graphs in the walls in their building to, I don't know, create these numerical metrics of worker productivity and how fast they were doing things, and was it going up or was it going down or was it plateauing, and it was kind of like metrics for the sake of metrics. And this kind of, it breeds this culture of fear, which is why I call it the worst of human nature, because then everybody's paying attention, instead of paying attention to what they're doing, they're paying attention to what everybody else is doing. You know, you get this in corporate world all the time. Nobody's paying attention to their job because they're too busy paying attention to making sure that everybody is following all the rules exactly to a T. You know, they're not taking extra smoke breaks, they're not, you know, coming in late for lunch, things like that. And so it takes what would be your job and turns it kind of into this prison mentality. You know, you have to be here, 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 and here, and you can only take so many pee breaks, and you know, just this is work, not a prison. And even people in prison should have more rights than that, okay? And so when you've got this kind of spreadsheet mentality and you're watching these numbers grow up, and you have these little graphs, and I've fallen into this as an office manager doing the books. I was very lucky that I wasn't in charge of the money. That, you know, I was just doing the books, and I let the treasurer of the company deal with how the money was being put out, because it's partly a triggering issue for me. Like, I like seeing the money numbers go up, okay? So you start watching those numbers go up, and you watch the graph go up, and our brains like this. Our brains put out dopamine and serotonin and stuff like that because when we see big numbers, it's why clicker rider games were so popular. It's why when you're playing an RPG and you have a vertical progression, you want to keep increasing your levels and increasing how much damage you do, because the brain likes the big numbers. So you get people who are greedy, and then you get the people who are, you know, you get this rush of feel-good endorphins while watching these numbers go up, and you don't want to watch them come down. You just want them to continue to go up and up and up. And the economy and manufacturing and stuff, it just doesn't work that way. Okay, that's not a natural system. You know, supply and demand is more like a rubber band rather than, you know, I don't know, something that the universe, which is constantly expanding, I guess. You know, that rubber band, if you try to keep it getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it's not natural for it. So it's either going to break, if your rubber band is kind of, you know, old, or it's brittle, it's going to snap back to its normal size, okay? So if you try to artificially inflate your profits, or something happens, like a pandemic, and your profits get higher than normal, when that event is over, or things have gone back to quote-unquote normal, I don't think we've gone back to normal, but here we are, those profits are going to shrink again. And, you know, or if you have something that's artificially inflated, like we had the tech bubble, we had the housing bubble, we're kind of on this college loan bubble. I'm waiting for that one to pop. It's going to collapse, and the numbers are going to come down, which is, you know, I think we shouldn't be paying attention to the stock market and all this, because it really doesn't affect anybody unless you have your retirement in the stock market. Which a lot of people do, which was not what the stock market was ever for. So they see the numbers go up, and the only way that they can keep those numbers going up is they only have kind of like control over a couple things. So the quality of their materials, if they're doing something with materials, or their labor, and how much they're paying for their labor, and how much labor they have. So in order to keep the numbers going up, they'll suppress wages, or they'll fire people. And then they'll add, the excess profit margins, or they'll do stock buybacks, or, they'll play with the money in ways that are not really ethical or moral. And all because they want to keep that number going up, because they have this spreadsheet in front of them, or this chart or this graph generated from the spreadsheet, and it's making them feel good. And they're hoarding, like a dragon, that money, okay? $18 billion worth of profit, $28 billion worth of profit. What good does that really do anybody if you're not taking that quote-unquote profit and reinvesting it back into your industry, or into your community, or into your quote-unquote infrastructure, or into your labor? Like, if you're not paying the people under you a living wage that they can support themselves and their families with, even if they have to have a 2-person household working, now we're getting up to a 4 or 5-person household working in some areas, why would they continue working for you? And we're having this kind of problem in almost every industry. Here in New York State, nurses, they're not being paid enough. And what they're being asked to do is like insane, and I don't blame them for leaving. Teachers, same way. They're leaving, and this is less of a New York State issue, but more like a Oklahoma issue and a Florida issue, and like, teachers aren't being paid enough. Teachers aren't being paid enough, and then they have to take their pay, and they have to use it for basic supplies. Like, they have to use it for pencils, and they have to use it for paper and Kleenex and decorating their rooms, and like, because the schools won't provide it. And but the schools will invest in their football programs. Man, if that football program was really making money, I wouldn't be quite so cynical about it. So they're leaving, and everybody's like, well, they're not there. And I'm like, they're people who would be nurses, or people who would be teachers. They're here. They're retiring, or they're leaving the state to look for someplace else to work. They would be here if the corporations would pay them more. But the corporations are so greedy, and they're hoarding onto their profit because they like that numbers going up. They don't care about quality of care, or they don't care, they don't care enough about the quality of life to pay the people properly and give them the paid leave, and the health insurance and the 401ks, and everything that a person needs to have a good middle class life in America. And like, excess profit is unpaid wages. So if they're just sitting there not doing anything with it. So, okay, I've gone through all this. Like, what do we do? Like, these corporations, they're so big, there's like so few of them, it feels like it's a monolith, so what can you do? And it's basically exactly what the unions do. The unions that gave us a 5-day work week, a 5-day 40-hour work week, that gave us weekends, that gave us the minimum wage, that put in child labor laws, that got OSHA going, things like that. The union striking people who are leaving these industries are kind of, like pulling their own little strikes. If you aren't going to pay us, we're not going to work for you, and we'll find something else, or the country will just collapse. What do we do? But so you have the unions, or you have your labor group, who can just strike, don't go into work, create a list of demands, organize. And that's one way that it can be dealt with. And the other way is that, government regulation. And everybody's like, ugh, we don't want government regulation. Well, during this kind of time, this glowing time that everybody seems to think they want to go back in the 50s or whatever, in the 60s. Oh my God. No, you don't really want to go back to that time. Not really. But back during that time, we had a lot more regulations being enforced upon corporations, which is why everything was so low. Plus, you had a lot of the GI bills and those type of bonds coming due, so that people could actually afford to go to college and buy a house. And, there was a lot more regulation that has either been systematically destroyed since the 80s. Yes, a lot of this goes back to the 80s. And I'm not going to say that Carter was, perfect, because, he was good, but I'm quite sure he wasn't perfect, okay? But a lot of this, the regulations were stripped away, or they no longer work as they're intended, or, we have had Citizens United, so we have all these lobbyists and money in politics that really shouldn't be there. I mean, it appears money has even bought the Supreme Court. Who knew? Not us. Not until now. We thought about it, we knew. So the government, whether it's your local government or your state government or even the federal government, there were these laws, there were these frameworks in place that were to protect the workers. So we wouldn't be at this whole 1910s, 1920s stage again. And so those laws would either have to be reinstated and enforced. How do you enforce them? Well, you have to hire people to enforce them. If you have food and drug laws from the FDA, you have to have FDA officers to enforce those food and drug laws. If you have, OSHA laws, you have to have OSHA people. If you have, tax laws, you have to have IRS agents. That's just the way it goes. And this is a good thing, because it means that people are getting jobs, even if they're government jobs. And that if these big corporations were broken up into smaller corporations, that means there would be more jobs for everybody. Funny how that works. So will this be done incrementally? Will we have to have this big stellar shift because we can't get the old people out of government? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. All I can say is that I don't like the idea of there being a dozen people with billions of dollars telling the government, and buying out people in the government and saying that, this is what we can and cannot do. And therefore also suppressing wages and, doing all sorts of shady things that they are doing. All because they have more money already that they can't spend, okay? They literally cannot spend the money they have. I mean, we have private billionaires trying to go to space, and they still can't spend all the money they have. So, it's, so workers, government, those are your two fists to go up against corporations like that. And we spent a good 30, 40, 50 years fighting for labor laws in this country. and only, 20, 30 years later to have them systematically torn apart or, ignored. Money does things to people. Personally, when I want to watch numbers go up and have my brain go, numbers, I play Cookie Click. It's very helpful. But I'm not sure if that explained anything clearly, or I hope it did. But this is why you're seeing the rise of a labor movement in America, at least. I don't know about overseas. I mean, France is definitely rioting and striking, so go France. I don't blame you. You have better working rights than we do, and don't let them take them away from you. But this is why you're seeing this kind of labor movement in the United States of America, and kind of side by side with a civil rights movement, the civil rights movement redux America, because corporations have this worst of human nature mentality that they just want to watch the numbers continue to grow up, even if that is at the expense of everybody else. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope I wasn't too political. If people would do the right thing, I wouldn't feel so political. We wouldn't be having this argument if corporations would just pay their workers a living wage, or more than a living wage. Take care of yourselves. Bless. Stay safe. And I'll see you in the next video.